Snowed under by orphan account. This is 1,368 words. When a snowstorm hits Chicago, Mike finds himself stuck in college.
Plans to spend Christmas alone, but a surprise visitor changes everything.
Mike shivers, plunging his hands into the pockets of his hoodie as he shuffles a little closer to the space heater. It's not especially effective, but it's cheaper to run than using the actual central heating in the apartment, so he's making do. After all, being as far north as it is, Chicago gets harsh winters, and the weather outside is a little short of a blizzard. Extracts one hand from the relative warmth of his city and dips it into the packet of chips he's been grazing on. Not exactly the most nutritious meal, but he didn't exactly plan on spending his time in his little studio apartment tonight. After all, it's 2 days until Christmas, so he was expecting to be in Hawkins, but the weather has put paid to that particular plan. His ancient car finally made its last journey a few weeks ago, after nearly 30 years of service in his family. Instead, Nancy offered to come pick him up and take him home, but she, like him, is snowed under in Detroit, so she's spending Christmas with Jonathan instead, leaving Mike on his own for Christmas. But having only discovered this less than 24 hours ago, his little apartment is not exactly well stocked. He's got a few tins of soup, some dried pasta, and a few eggs, which she supposes is downright sensible by most student standards. But it's not enough to last him through Christmas Day, nor is it any great substitute for the excellent dinner he'll be missing back home. I guess I'll actually have to go to the store tomorrow, he thinks tersely, glancing out of the window, where thick flakes of snow swirl around the streetlights. Not exactly thrilled at the prospect of braving the weather for overpriced seasonal goods, or anything for that matter, but between that and starvation, he'll take the frostbite. He's not heard from Will in a while, which is a weight on his mind as well. He's been trying not to think about it, but he feels as though Will's been avoiding him. Rationally, he knows this is ridiculous. They video call most days and text through others, and Will's had a big design project due this week, as well as his photography portfolio. Mike himself has spent most of the week on his laptop trying to focus on researching his classic literature paper, but they haven't called in a few days now, and Mike's starting to worry that, well, Will is planning on breaking up with him and is trying to soften the blow. When he thinks about it objectively, he knows he's being ridiculous, but he can't shake the thought. He checks his phone more out of the habit than anything, but still no messages from Will, even though Mike texted him hours ago. Admittedly, the reception is temperamental at best of times and absolutely atrocious in severe weather, but Mike's still concerned. He hears a car's door slam in the street and glances out the window. He can't see much through the snow, but the same faint glow of a taxi's light is visible. Mike thinks he hears someone shout a muffled word of thanks. He shivers again and sinks back into the couch, scrolling idly through his text chain with Will, disheartened when he reached last week's messages only a few minutes. The buzzer sounds, and Mike jumps at the intrusive sound. "Who the hell?" he mutters, shrugging off the blanket and treading quickly but gently across the carpet. The neighbor below has regularly complained that he walks too loud. "Hello?" he says cautiously into the intercom, but only static greets him. Some joker, no doubt. He tuts crossly, annoyed at being dragged from his warm position for no reason. He's just sat down again when there's a knock on the apartment door. Mike lets out a guttural groan as he stands up, muttering to the effect that if it's Mr. Kendall from downstairs, he's going to push him down the stairs. He pulls open, bracing himself for a fright, but he freezes in shock. There, bundled up in a hat, coat, and a scarf that barely conceals his grin, is his boyfriend. "Will?" he croaks, his voice rough from the lack of use. As Will lets out an excited squeak, throws his arms around Mike. "What the hell are you doing here?" he exclaims into his shoulder, and by way of answer, Will pulls out of the hug and presses his lips firmly against Mike's. "Surprise!" he says gleefully when they break apart, stepping in and shutting the door behind him. "I'm so confused," Mike says with bemused laugh, surreptitiously reaching for the thermostat and turning it up. "Jonathan called me last night," Will explains, taking off his multitude of extra clothing. "I was putting the finishing touches on my portfolio, so he left a message saying that Nancy couldn't come get you, so you'd be spending Christmas alone." Mike nods, helping him remove his coat and hanging his hat and gloves on the wall heater. "So I booked the first flight I could and got a cab from the airport. Gotta say, did not love landing in this weather." "Wait a minute," Mike says slowly. "You flew from Louisville to Chicago to see me." "Duh," says Will like it's obvious. "But what about your mom, Hopper, and Elle?" "They're fine," he says dismissively. "I called them and explained. Hop even said they'd contribute to the flight costs." But, but, Mike stutters, trying to make sense of this. "But why?" "Why?" Will repeats carelessly. "Because I love you, you dork, and I want to spend Christmas with you." Mike takes a moment to process this. Here he was, fretting that Will was planning to break up with him, when instead he must have spent at least $100 to make sure Mike wouldn't spend Christmas by himself. "I love you too," he says in wonderment, pulling him into another hug. "I'm afraid I don't have much in," he says feebly. "Didn't think you would," Will replies a little more gently. Mike can only assume the adrenaline is wearing off, thinking about it. Will's portfolio deadline was midnight last night, and goodness knows when he left this morning. He must be exhausted. "I asked the cab driver to stop by Wendy's on the way." "Oh my god, I love you even more now." There's a slight tremor of a sigh in his voice, and Will gives him that funny look again. "When was the last time you ate?" "5 minutes ago," Mike says truthfully. Will narrows his eyes, and Mike knows that's not what he means. All the same, he, as Will reaches into his backpack for the food, Mike decides it's not worth it. Instead, he uses a distraction to shove the space heater to the side of the room and kick the empty chip bag under the couch to be dealt with later. He grabs a blanket, though, and retreats to the bed. "You must be freezing," he says to Will as he joins him under the blanket, snuggling into him as he passes over the Wendy's bag. "Ugh, yeah," Will mutters as Mike breathes in the warm, salty aroma of the bag and pulls out a chicken sandwich. "It's awful out there, and that's mine," he adds, sharply seizing the sandwich. "Yours is different. Yours is underneath." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that I'm not a heathen, and I don't ruin my food with mayo." "Excuse me," Mike says affronted. "A chicken sandwich without mayonnaise is just dry A chicken sandwich without mayonnaise is just dry bread and dry meat." "The way God intended," Will replies firmly. Mike arches an eyebrow. "We, of all people." "Oh, shut up." Will chuckles lightly, flicking Mike's face to make him squeak in protest. But he doesn't, nor does he complain when, as they settle down to sleep, Will's legs twist around his. Will's perpetually cold feet have always been a sticking point in the relationship. After all, he's just glad Will's here. It certainly isn't what he imagined Christmas would look like, but even so, it could just turn out to be one of the best ones ever.